I hope you are having a great time here in Miami. I know I am. It's beautiful. We're talking about Bitcoin, mining, all the awesome things. And we have a really great panel planned out. My name is Jenna. I am host of Jenna X Media on YouTube, and I am a crypto content creator. But enough about me. I'm going to pass it over to all of our awesome panelists here just so you guys can say hi and introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Jenna. My name is Daniel Diaz. I'm currently the Executive Director of Citizens for Sound Money. We advocate the use of sound money and protect people's rights to do so. My side hobby is crypto mining and blockchain consulting, which used to be my primary business, but we'll get into that in the panel.
Hello, everybody. I'm CJK, longtime Bitcoiner, founder of People's Reserve. Looking forward to talking about the future of tokenization.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Hutson. I worked on the core team that did the TCP/IP protocol that you guys use now today with so little thought about it. And that's what makes the blockchain run. But so later on, then thinking Bitcoin was a Ponzi scheme until I realized in 2018 it wasn't, and I've done a lot of different stuff in the crypto industry up to this point.
My name is Matt Moore. I host America's syndicated Bitcoin radio show on traditional radio. It doubles as a podcast as well. But my other host, Rick Jackson, he's going to be on the next panel, but he's the Deputy Attorney General for Oklahoma when it comes to digital assets. So hopefully I'll have some fun things to say.
Hi, my name is Jeannette Spaulding. I'm at the intersection of traditional finance and DeFi. I had a 10-year career in finance at institutions like BlackRock, Bank of America, and BNY Mellon at the VP level. I've been in blockchain and tokenization since 2017. I've helped dozens of blockchain and tokenization startups get set up. And I also have a webinar series and newsletter called Digital Asset Leader, where I bring to the forefront all of the things that are happening in the digital asset space.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's kick it off. Blockchain and tokenization, that is our topic. So it would make sense that our first question, and feel free, anyone who'd love to answer this first, just jump on in, pass those mics around. How does tokenization impact the energy sector?
Well, why are we here today, guys? This is Bitcoin Energy Summit, right? So it's Bitcoin that affects the energy sector. It's Bitcoin, I like to say, that is the real ESG. We need a little bit less green piece and a little bit more orange piece. Why? Because we can capture wasted energy. There's 60% of energy is going to ground. So we need to tap into that energy and limit our waste to increase sustainability. And Bitcoin is the #1 mechanism for that because it incentivizes it with economic incentives. We're seeing Bitcoin being integrated vertically into real world businesses. There is no other crypto, no other protocol that is doing that. Bitcoin is what's being institutionalized as digital gold on Wall Street. Bitcoin is what's being vertically integrated into real world businesses to increase bottom lines. That leads to increased sustainability, increased profitability, increased investment, and progress.
And let's be honest here, right? What is Bitcoin? It's the tokenization of energy. We're taking pure electricity and making it into a financial product. And that's exactly what we're doing, right? I mean, Bobby over here, Bobby Davidoff, we had a meeting with some governor, senior advisors. He was holding up a piece of coal. He's like, this piece of coal, what it is in nature, is what Bitcoin is for pure energy because it stores energy and then we monetize it. So that's how it really affects it, right? This is where this tokenization panel. We can tokenize anything. Anything can be tokenized. But I think the ingenuity and genius behind what Satoshi made was the way to transfer and take this energy that's being generated and make it into a monetary unit.
All right. Bitcoin is the tokenization of energy. I have to tell that to my XRP friends. They're going to like that one. So guys, how do you see tokenization reshaping traditional financial systems and asset ownership models?
I can take that one. So honestly, the implications are sort of the mind boggles when one thinks of it, because when you look at all the different asset classes that exist, of course, you have real world assets, you have equity, you have fixed income, and you have to look at it from the perspective of what is the use case for the individual and what's the use case for the institution. Right now, we see institutions like BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, and Citi that are launching pilot programs for the tokenization of frequently traded fixed income, for example, repo markets that are traded overnight. And they're doing that purely from an operational efficiency perspective. So oftentimes they're even operating on permissioned blockchains, which is probably going to be a very controversial subject. So I'll skip ahead to that, to talk about the public blockchain activity, which is more for the individual. And that's where we're starting to also see a lot of progress with real world assets, putting assets like real estate and even, the equity of your own company on chain and giving a wider swath of the population access to these, private market assets, which is a market that's usually been very hard to access for the everyday person. So we're democratizing finance as well.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I want to give an answer, but I want to make sure I'm relevant here.
Absolutely. How do you see tokenization reshaping traditional financial systems and asset ownership models?
You want to go or? So as executive director of Citizens for Sound Money, we are pushing legislation in 24 states to make gold and silver legal tender, which is constitutional in Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution. But what's innovative and different than what the other 5 states that have legal tender, gold and silver, is that in our legislation, we're tokenizing gold and silver so that people can easily transfer and use the gold and silver as a form of functional currency. So that's how it's going to change the financial sector, at least on the gold and silver side, because we're the only country in the world where the states have a constitutional right to turn gold and silver into money again. We've used gold and silver as for 195 years. And I'm for making Bitcoin money, but the Constitution prohibits anything but gold and silver at the state level. So the fight for Bitcoin is the federal government trying to get them to give states the permission to make gold and silver legal tender. The way I see as bridging that gap between traditional finance and making Bitcoin money is by tokenizing physical assets like gold and silver. And then once they get used to using tokenized gold as money, we can say, look, Bitcoin is harder money. Let's consider doing that at the state level.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of tokenizing real-world assets is exciting to a lot of people, but I would make the point, and I'm not saying this to be a Debbie Downer, but I do think we have challenges that we have to address, especially in a legal sense with legislation, because a lot of times there are not many jurisdictions that actually allow direct issuance of these real-world assets onto a blockchain. A lot of times they have to use a thing called a SPV, a special purpose vehicle for this, and that vehicle is a traditional financial tool that falls under the regulations of the traditional system that we have in place. And so what is often being tokenized is not actually the asset itself, but it's the SPV. And so the reason why those SPVs are often utilized is because there has to be a legal framework. So if, let's say you had a $2 million Rolex that you were tokenizing shares of or ownership of, well, if that Rolex disappears, well, there's going to be a lot of people who are unhappy because that just went to zero, whatever token that they were holding representing that asset. So there has to be some kind of entity to sue. And I think we have a long ways to go to see this adaptation to this idea of tokenizing real world assets. I do think there's some promise. I do think it's going to happen. But the other point too is when these real world assets are being traded, they're being traded in marketplaces that honestly don't have a lot of liquidity, and they can't be traded on your typical crypto exchanges because they are SPVs. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it unfolds, and maybe traditional finance may run with it more because they're used to operating in that world unless we maybe change the way things are done legally.
Yeah, I'd like to also second that motion he just said, because at the end of the day, if you're buying tokens or Bitcoin or whatever tokens, what makes it valuable is the ability to trade, and the ability to trade on exchanges very easily. That we don't have yet with real world asset tokenizations. And the problem that he just brought up was each class of asset has different regulations behind it. So if it's a real estate property, then somebody's got to own the deed to the real estate. That has to be legally divided up. And then how do you and by the way, how are you going to create a DEX for that, right? I mean, what are you going to trade against? Who's going to provide the liquidity? So there's a great amount of opportunity coming up in this. Whoever figures it out, and yeah, so it's real, it's there, but there's a lot of obstacles in the way.
Yeah, I'd like to add that you have to think about the economic incentives of tokenization. So let's say you own this beautiful hotel and you want to tokenize your hotel. The main argument for the hotel owner is that you get access to liquidity. But if you sell a portion of the ownership of your hotel to raise that money to maybe add a pool, well, now the value of your hotel has gone up because you added a pool. So you have to buy back your ownership at a higher level. Doesn't it make more sense to just go to the bank, take a loan, let your cash flows close that liability, and at the end of it, you have 100% ownership of your property plus the pool? So when we talk about blockchain tokenization, I think we have to ask ourselves, is this working right now? And the number one example we have is the tokenization of the dollar. It's a multi-$100 billion marketplace where Tether, who has 100 employees, made $6 billion last year. Morgan Stanley has 84,000 employees. They only made $1 billion more. So this is working right now with the tokenization of the dollar. And I think, although it's exciting to talk about the tokenization of real estate and watches and yachts, the next step in this, and we see it with Larry Fink at BlackRock, is debt products. So we've successfully tokenized the dollar. Now we're going to tokenize debt. And where we go from there, who knows? But this is an exciting future for tokenization.
Can I just, I would just want to say I 100% agree with that. I think that debt is where we're seeing the most activity right now. And to your point, while the equity use case is still sort of, we're trying to work on that, you can actually also tokenize private debt. And so I see that almost as being like a bridge while we're kind of in this figuring it out stage.
Awesome, guys. Thank you. So let's pivot just a little bit from that. How do you see TradFi and DeFi working together in the future? And a second part to this question, does TradFi adopt DeFi systems and assets and hope to survive? And by doing so, do they fade away and become increasingly less relevant?
So they're already doing it, right? ISO 2022 is a underlying platform for the central banks to send tokenized currencies around the world instantaneously. So TradFi is already adopting DeFi. In my opinion, DeFi has already won the battle. It's just getting people to adopt it and start learn how to use it. And obviously, I think centralized exchanges and even banks, right? I as executive director, we're working with gold and silver companies who are chain agnostic that are putting gold and silver on any chain, and they have an API to integrate into bank systems in the back end to transfer your fiat currency into gold and silver. So that is already happening. The traditional finance is losing. They've lost, and they're quickly moving into the DeFi space. So it's just a matter of time till everything is digital and electronic, especially real world assets. And just a comment about debt. I mean, as a sound money advocate, I think debt is death and debt is slavery. So the fact that the governments are now tokenizing notes and bonds and even mortgage debt, I mean, it's another way to program the debt and be able to, in my opinion, stifle our freedom.
I think this is the most exciting topic maybe of the whole summit, because what we're seeing is when you integrate TradFi with DeFi, there's the opportunity to create brand new innovative debt products. One of these things would be called like a principal protected capital note. So if you do like $100 million raise, you can take 80 million of that 100 million and put it in US treasuries. Now the principal is protected by the printer that the Fed has. Well, what about the other 20 million? You can put it in Bitcoin and take advantage of that 60% compounding annual growth rate. So at the end of it, if everything goes wrong, the nominal value of your investment is protected. But if things go right, the yield on that note is relative to the performance of Bitcoin, the best performing asset in the world. And we're going to see new innovative debt products that combine treasuries with Bitcoin to produce products that create yield that have never been seen or sustainable in the traditional system.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, traditional finance, I think they're motivated by profit, just like all of us. I don't think traditional finance is getting into this for the ideology. I think they're looking for those mad gains. But, they do want to get in control. They do want to get involved because I do think there's an element that involves TradFi wanting to maintain this type of monopoly on these financial services. But it's almost, some might say it might be kind of like a Trojan horse. But the way I see traditional finance or centralized traditional finance versus decentralization. I don't think traditional finance is necessarily going to disappear overnight. I think they'll become less and less relevant, but especially as we make this transition, because old habits die hard. So therefore, these institutions are going to be used in a very custodian manner as well. But as the older generation passes away, and handing these assets to the younger generation who are digital natives, you're probably going to see more of those go into self-custodian wallets or used in a more decentralized fashion instead of having traditional financial companies or vehicles to manage those funds. But that's just my opinion.
I think also it's a great point about some folks have brought up adoption. Some folks have brought up what are actual users going to turn to. Are they going to turn to DeFi or are they going to turn to TradFi? And I think we really have to consider the adoption curve. And right now, I know all of us in this room are on the cutting edge of things, but for the average person, we're still very early in the curve. And there's this sort of like chasm that still needs to be crossed before this becomes mainstream. And in a sense, traditional finance gives comfort to people. I've had numerous conversations with people where they haven't really been introduced to blockchain yet, and when they hear that this is being pursued by larger institutions, that actually is an impetus for them to explore further because it gives legitimacy to decentralization and blockchain in their eyes. So we have to also think about it from the perspective of what's going to drive adoption. And in my opinion, we're talking about, a timescale of decades as opposed to months, years, whatever, in terms of the mainstream really adopting this in a way that would actually threaten the financial industry. And then also we have to think about, well, by that time, 20 years from now, the financial industry might be synonymous with DeFi because we already see a lot of these large players that are adopting blockchain. So to your point about the Trojan horse, there might not be a difference in 20 years between TradFi and DeFi.
I'd like to elaborate on that Trojan horse because I think this is a really important point, especially when we heard Congressman Donalds yesterday talking about this. Our bank deposits are, in the best case scenario, backed by 10 cents to the dollar. Stable coins, this legislation act, is a 1-to-1 ratio. So what you're saying to the market is, would you like a stable coin that's backed 1-to-1? Or would you like to keep your bank deposit that's backed, in the best case, 10 cents to the dollar? So there could be a threat to the fractional reserve banking model to the benefit of we the people who would have a secured stablecoin liquidity, 24/7, 365 access to your own money, your keys, your stablecoins.
Yeah, but commenting on that, the issue is regulation. People feel comfortable going to Bear Stearns or Morgan Stanley because they're regulated. FTX was not regulated. Okay, so it's also so maybe they combine together once we get the crypto regulation in place. At least how hard it is for a guy to get a Series 7 security license or whatever. For them to set up exchanges and we go through this process, they'll be the same thing.
To add to that, since we still have a couple moments, can you discuss some of the regulatory challenges and opportunities they're facing blockchain and tokenization?
Yeah, well, that would be my boat. I mean, I've lobbied in about 15 states out of the 24 that we've been trying to get gold and silver, tokenized gold and silver. And the number one objection that we get is, this isn't crypto, is it? So we had to change our language because anything that says digital within the legislation freaks out the legislature. So we rephrased it as electronic transfer of gold and silver. And then we redefined that as electronic currency backed one-to-one with digital assets. And that's the problem with FTX, Luna, all these collapses, and the trust of the people broken. It also broke the trust with the state legislatures. I'm not sure at the federal level. I don't think anything's possible at the federal level. I think they're way gone. But I think at the state level, if we get enough state legislatures to pass stablecoin legislation like Wyoming is at the cutting edge of stablecoin legislation right now. Right now, Missouri is at the cutting edge right now, if we get it passed at gold and silver tokenization. But it isn't the entire legislature that's the problem. And this is what a lot of people in grassroots don't understand. It's 2, maybe 3 people that kill legislation in every single state. We might have 99% of every legislator on both sides of the aisle that support a piece of legislation. But if the lobby, if the bank lobby, the insurance lobby has the Speaker of the House and the Senate leader in their pocket, it doesn't matter because they run the state legislators with an iron fist. And what they say, it's like God speaking in the legislature. So the 2 best ways to make legislation get through is either through massive grassroots effort or having a super PAC and greasing the pockets of these leaders' super PACs themselves. Because when you pick up the phone call and you're like, hey, remember that 50 grand or 100K that I gave your super PAC in this election? It's time to call in a favor. And that's how American politics works. It's a crime, it's corruption, but it's how our democracy works, unfortunately. And that's the problem with legislation. And it's even worse in Washington. I tell people the most realistic viewpoint of how the American system works is House of Cards. And it's like a documentary. I swear to God. That's American politics in a nutshell.
Yeah, so I think long term we could have some regulatory issues for all the reasons you guys astutely pointed out. But again, this goes back to what I said. What's working right now? You have Circle, a publicly traded U.S. company with a stable coin, and they have reporting requirements. They have one-to-one reserve ratios. When Silicon Valley Bank went bust, the stable coin dropped down to around 89 cents. And if you were paying attention, you can go look at their reporting and say, hey, even if Silicon Valley Bank is not bailed out, I understand that this is worth 97 cents. So when it's trading at 87 cents because people are panicking, there really was no reason to panic. You just do a little bit more due diligence and understand, wow, if everything goes wrong and Silicon Valley Bank isn't backed out, this is worth 97 cents. So I think having a clear infrastructure and reporting structure for these publicly traded companies that offer these stable coins, Circle much better than Tether, which I mentioned earlier, makes a big deal to moving the industry forward. And that's why I think it's an easy step to move into debt rather than to skip that portion. And I think Larry at BlackRock, they have over $250 million of tokenized treasuries. Yeah, they back Circle. So to me, there is no regulatory problem when we go from tokenized dollars into tokenized debt. Where you start to run into the problems is when you talk about hotels and watches and yachts. So again, let's start with what we know we can do and build from there.
Awesome panel, guys. Oh, go ahead with our
Quickly,
closing thoughts. Our time is up. Go
there
for
is
it.
a legal structure. If you do a Reg D, which is private market, sort of legal structure, you can list that on an ATS as a token, and there are registered ATSs that are licensed to trade digital securities. So there is a legal pathway actually for tokenization of private market assets. There's just no liquidity, as has been pointed out by the panel. So that's the one issue, is like getting the liquidity to these platforms that are regulated.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Please let everyone know where to find you. Go ahead and shoot it down.
So look me up on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. I also am usually posting my musings on tokenization and digital assets. My name is long and spelled out over there and over there. So please look me up.
You can go to mattjmoore.com. That's Matt with 2 T's, Moore with 2 O's, mattjmoore.com. And you can always scan my T-shirt. It'll take you directly to my website.
LinkedIn.
You can find me on Twitter at CJ Konstantinos. Same on YouTube. Check us out at peoplesreserve.com. We go into beta in August. We'll be live by the end of the year.
And you can find me, my personal handle is Mining Life CEO, Mining Life CEO. And then my organization's handle is a number 4 Sound Money. Number 4 Sound Money, same thing with YouTube.
Thank you so much, guys. Give it up. Give them a round of applause.